Hey everyone, and welcome to another installment in the Halo implementation series. With me today, again, you all know what I'm going to say. I got my favorite person from Halo with me, Mr. Halo himself, the legendary legend of all legends, Mr. Morgan Aspinall. And today we're going to talk about billing and specifically around recurring invoices and how to use them, when to use them, all that kind of stuff. So, hey Morgan, how you doing? And thanks for joining me again.
Yeah. Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me. I think I might have to get a plaque up soon. Yeah, Mr. Halo.
I'm scratching his head from here. We're actually in different locations, and
yeah. Grows by the day. Yeah, pleasure to be back. It's a big sort of part of the implementation that we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks, I presume. That's billing in Halo. It's not quite as complicated as it may seem, but it's very important to make sure that everyone has a thorough understanding of all the mechanisms behind it. So yeah, and over the next few videos, we're going to be looking at all of the different mechanisms behind billing. So recurring invoices, agreements. We're going to have a look at labor billing and prepay and billing plan combinations and how it all ties together. But yeah, as Chris mentioned, we'll start off with our recurring invoices. So let me share my screen.
I think this is a good one because, especially people that are coming in from different PSA tools, right? There's always a lot of confusion as to, what's the difference between a contract and a recurring invoice or an agreement and a recurring invoice. So I think what we'll do is we'll cover off recurring invoices, and then, as you said, over the next few sessions, we'll talk about how they all tie together and, whether you can use one without the other and stuff like that. But we'll focus predominantly on what is a recurring invoice, how does it work, why do we need it, all that kind of stuff in this session.
That's exactly it. So we'll start off with the most basic form of invoice generation in Halo, and that is manually creating an invoice, right? So pretty straightforward that. All we need to do is go to our Invoices module, where down here on the left-hand side, we've got all of our different lists. We will be covering all of these shortly, but for now, we're just going to be in our Invoices list. And all I need to do is click New in the top right. That's going to open up the new invoice screen, where we can break this screen down into two sections. On the right-hand side, we have our sort of miscellaneous invoice information, some of that high-level info, who's the customer / site being invoiced in this case, what's our invoice date, what's our due date, any internal or external notes that we want to add as well. And then on the left-hand side, the main bulk of the screen here is where we're actually adding our invoice lines, which follows a similar procedure to adding our quote lines to our quotes and proposals, which is something that we did in a recent session. So again, we have our add products section, or our add products button, where we're searching through our existing inventory to add our products in. We can, of course, add generic products, which does not equate to anything in our inventory, nor will it ever equate to anything in our inventory. It's a one-time line that you don't want to put into your product list, but you just want to add in this case. Again, we also have those options to add a group of items from our existing group templates, something that we had a look at in one of the recent sessions, specifically around CRM. And then we can also add bespoke groups to our invoice as well. So we might want to do licenses. Go in and edit these lines and select the group that they exist within. Save that. And that's it, simple as that. Creation of an invoice, pretty straightforward. So of course, the next step in complexity here is to think about creating a recurring invoice. So now I'll just go over to my recurring invoice list. Again, I'll click New. Now, I just want to highlight what exactly is a recurring invoice in HaloPSA. And I like to refer to recurring invoices in Halo as templates for invoice creation, right? So have seen in a previous session the concept of email templates, where we create our email template once, we add our variables in, and then each instance of an invoice that is sent out, each instance of an email that is sent out of Halo will make use of that template, replace those variables. Recurring invoices work in a very similar fashion, where the recurring invoice is the template, where, in here we're setting our schedule, we're adding some variables for dates, perhaps the duration over which a service is covered. And then based on our schedule, each month, each quarter, each year, when that schedule is met, instances of invoices will be generated. So, with that in mind, again, we're looking at a very similar screen to what we saw a moment ago. We have our high-level information on the right-hand side. There are some additional options now. Again, of course, we've got our customer. But now with our recurring invoice, we have this schedule section. It cannot be overstated how important it is to set a schedule for your recurring invoices, because of course, without a schedule for your recurring invoices, the invoices themselves never get generated and you never get paid. So very important to make sure that you're setting a schedule up here. Okay. The schedule itself can be pretty flexible. I mean, from my experience, there are sort of two primary schedules that we're looking to utilize. And that is creating invoices at the start of the month or creating invoices at the end of the month. For anything in between, of course, you simply just pick the date in the calendar here. So we set our start date and our repeat period and our end date if applicable. And then based on that, we can see our calendar up top with the date in the calendar that corresponds to when the invoices themselves will be generated. So of course, we set our schedule to be the 17th of August and repeat monthly. So that means that on the 17th of each month, an invoice will be created.
Can I just make a suggestion on this quickly, by the way, which something I've noticed and a lot of customers have brought up with me. That calendar that we're looking at now is not clickable. So
correct.
It would be nice to actually have the option to be able to click in there rather than having to go to the start date and then have that updated. Yeah,
I agree. I have logged that with our development team previously to have it sort of work two ways. But yeah, at the minute, it's more a way to visualize the output. But I do agree that this should be interactive as well.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah. So we've got our start date. Obviously, if it's the start of the month, we're repeating monthly. That's fine. If you want your invoices generated on the last day of the month, what you can do is simply pick a number of days ahead of the existing schedule to create our invoices, namely 1 day ahead, which now means that invoices will be generated on the last day of each month. Of course, you can set that 3 days before, have them generated a couple of days before the end of the month, and so on.
Yeah.
Another option in our sort of recurring invoice header section, what we see on the right hand side, is our additional lines. So we'll come back to how these work when we have a better understanding of billing in general. It's just worth bearing in mind for now that there is the ability to bundle together all of the different types of charges that would have accrued throughout the month. So all of your billable labor can be added onto the recurring invoice. All of your hardware that you've issued on tickets, all of your project charges and so on, can all be wrapped up onto one document each month, each quarter. Cool. And then beyond that, again, similar information, similar miscellaneous information to what we saw previously. Now, there's one other option in our recurring invoices that we didn't have in the standard invoice generation, and that is our add recurring item. So again, we've got our add product, add generic product, add group, create group, but now we've got this add recurring item or add recurring product. So recurring products in Halo. Are simply products that are marked as recurring. So against each product, we have a checkbox. And by checking this, we are suggesting or we are stating that this product is going to become a recurring product. Simple as that. So we can add our recurring products in. Of course, we can add our non-recurring products as well. Just bear in mind that they'll only be added to a single instance of the invoices. So you can add a product in, and then it will get added to the first invoice that's generated, and then not added to any subsequent invoices.
So that would be a good example of, yeah, like if you were selling hardware as part of this, you might want to add that to the first invoice up front, or you were charging some kind of setup fee or something like that, where you might want to charge the setup fee in the beginning and have that as a one-off, and then moving forward, all the other ones are just recurring. Yeah, so I see that happen quite a lot, that people are doing something up front, like hardware or software or whatever it is, or some kind of fee. So
cool. Yeah. Same here. Yeah, the setup fee is a common example. Cool. So, a couple of points to note. Firstly, as we have, as I mentioned, our recurring invoices are templates for invoice creation. Now, what's important when considering templates for invoice creation is the use of dollar variables. So this will generate invoices at the start of each month. It's very common that you're going to want to, on those invoices, return the duration over which the services, licenses, subscriptions are applicable for. So, invoice generated at the start of August, and that might be for licenses throughout August. So one might want to say that, these lines are going to be for the 1st of August until the 1st of September, and then next month that's going to be September to October, and so on. And we can achieve that by making use of our dollar variables. Now, the list of dollar variables that can be applied to recurring invoices can be found by clicking the pencil against our recurring invoice line, where we'll see a small paragraph at the top here with a link to view our available variables. So I'll click that. And these are the variables that we're going to be able to use in our recurring invoices. Now, notice how when I added those recurring items in, this dollar recurring billing date was automatically added. So, of course, you're not going to want to have to go into every single recurring invoice line and amend the variables. You're going to want to default that somewhere and have that globally applied for all recurring items subsequently added to recurring invoices. And we can find that default option in config billing general under our invoice creation variables, where in here we've got our recurring item description, where we're just saying we want to return the name of the recurring item or the name of the recurring product, and then this dollar recurring billing date. Now, this leads me on to my second point. Since we first spun this trial up, we've actually got some more applicable variables that we'll want to make use of, because this recurring billing date is just going to be a single date, and it's just going to be the date of invoice creation. So in this case, it would just be the 1st of August, which doesn't make much sense. We actually want to return a duration of time over which the license is relevant for.
Yeah, so like for the month
and
of August,
we can do that. Sorry, Chris, what was that?
No, I was going to say, so like for the month of August, right? So we can go, yeah, these are your services from the 1st to the 31st of August that we're billing you for.
That's it. That's exactly it. Yeah. And to make use of that functionality, we want to use dollar period start date and dollar period end date. So let's do something like this: start date. Start date.
You might want to even write in there that says for the period of or whatever. So I do that with it. That says yeah, the description, and then yeah, for the period, whatever to whatever.
Yes, yeah, something like that. As a side note, a question that often comes up is, okay, well, I've got these, got this dollar period start date and I've got this dollar period end date. These are going to return dates. I want to change the format of those dates. I don't want it to be day, month, year. I want it to be month, day, year, or I don't want it to be numerical. I want it to actually say, you know, 01 org till 01 sept, right? So a handy point to note throughout the application is if we're making use of date dollar variables, you know, the data ticket was logged, period start date, the resolution day, if we're talking about dates in Halo and we're using variables to return them, we can actually add curly brackets directly after the variable and add our own formatting in. So I might want to use dashes instead. Just like so. Cool. So I've added that in to config billing general. Notice how it's not actually going to update these existing lines. It will only be applicable to lines added after that change is made. So let me just do that. Notice how now we've got period start date, period end date has disappeared. See what that's all about. Probably a period start date. Is this?
Just put it on, run the invoice and see if it shows up. I think it does show up actually when you do the invoice.
Yeah, I think it's just cached. I think it's taken an incomplete value. So I'm just going to click F5. There it is, period. Go back in here, set my schedule. Customer, add my lines. There we go. It's better. Yeah. Yeah. So notice how, based on the default variable we put in config bill in general, that's then been applied to all of those lines subsequent to making that change. Now, naturally, the next question is, okay, so we've got period start date and we've got period end date. What are those dates? Where are they being pulled from in the system? And those are being pulled from our creation period that we have over on the right-hand side here. So in this case, period start date would be the start of July, and period end date would be the end of July. Naturally, the question that follows on from there is, okay, well, I actually want this invoice that's generated at the start of August to be for August. And hence I want period start date to be the 1st of August, and I want period end date to be the 30th. So that's all based on this option directly below, where we are specifying whether we are basically billing in arrears, which is previous period, billing in advance, which is current period, or billing in advance +1, which is next period. So we were using previous period. I'm going to change this to current period, save that, and notice how my period is now throughout August instead of throughout July. Now I believe that there is an option in configuration billing recurring invoices to set our default option for that in here. So, you know, if you do just bill in advance globally, and you don't want to have to worry about changing that for each recurring invoice, you can come in here and you can select your default option in config and billing recurring invoices. Cool. So let's go ahead and think about the creation of this invoice now. This is the most basic setup for a recurring invoice, we will be coming back and having a look at some additional options, like how we adjust the quantities of these based on different parts of the system. But, you know, we'll work our way up to that point. But now we're just worried about just creating a recurring invoice. So here we go. Got a recurring invoice here. And there is the ability to have these recurring invoices automatically created. Again, that's an option in configuration billing recurring invoices, where right at the top, we've got our automatically create recurring invoices.
Yeah.
Now, my advice would be, at least while you're getting up to speed with Halo, while you're understanding the platform and you're understanding why invoices have the certain bits of data on them that you would expect or that you wouldn't expect, while you're doing that, probably recommend leaving this off, just as a means for you to manually check those recurring invoices before you generate them, and make sure that you understand everything that is on those invoices. However, after a couple of months, once you're comfortable with everything and you're happy with the invoices that are generated, you can come back in here, you can enable this, and then once that schedule has been met, the invoices will be automatically generated. And you'll see here as well, if automatically generated, they can be automatically sent to the account's email address for the respective client, where the account's email address is something that we set within our client or within our customer record under the billing tab, just here in account's email address.
Yeah. And this is something that, again, and so, you know, people coming in from tools like Autotask will actually be quite familiar with that, well, the ability to automatically create recurring invoices, because at the moment in Autotask, there is no ability to automatically create them. You have to run the process manually. So you have to run, you know, every single invoice, they call it a proven post. So you have to run that process every month in order to generate these invoices. And there's two schools of thoughts on that. You know, a lot of people kind of say, well, why would you want to do that if they're always the same? But from my point of view, I actually leave mine turned off, because I would much rather, at least in Halo, you know, I would much rather manually every single month make sure that my invoices are correct and make sure that, you know, the quantities are correct, you know, before the invoice goes out. So I think, depending on the type of company, you know, if you know that absolutely nothing's ever going to change and it's always the same services, then yeah, by all means set it as automatically. But I think it's nice to be able to say, especially with invoicing, right? I don't want to get it wrong. I don't want an invoice to be sent out to a customer, or especially if you got that box ticked to automatically send it to the customer. You know, I don't want to have an invoice sent to the customer and go, oh, I should have billed you for 10 licenses and I've only billed you for 5, or, you know, oh, you're no longer on Microsoft 365 Business Basic. Oh, actually, it should have been premium, you know. So I'd much rather do it manually. But I get why the automatic one's a good thing that people want to do.
I couldn't agree more, to be honest. I would be exactly the same. I'll double check an email before I send it, let alone double checking an invoice before it's sent to a customer. So yeah, I totally agree. As you mentioned, the option is there for people that are checking it month in, month out, and they're finding it a waste of time and they're just happy with the numbers that are there. And yeah, like you say, especially if your recurring invoices are all static, nothing's going to change. So there's not as much of a motivation there to double check the figures each month. So yeah, cool. So sorry, Chris.
No, I was going to say exactly. And I mean, I think it's you see that a lot, right? You see it that people are I think if you have a bigger team of people, maybe you want to leave them as manual, because maybe those people can check. But, you know, I understand if you're a one-man band, or, you know, a few people in your company, you really don't want to be manually sending out your invoices every month. So maybe in that particular instance, you might say, actually, do you know what? I'll just click the box and let Halo just kind of send them out, because they never change, as you say.
Yeah. Now, if that box is left unchecked, of course, you will have to manually create those recurring invoices. invoices. Now, the process of doing so is again achieved via going to the Invoices module, where in our Invoices module, we have this Ready for Invoicing section. Now, the Ready for Invoicing section of HaloPSA can be thought of as an interactive dashboard of everything in Halo that can have an invoice generated for it, but does not yet have any invoices or does not yet have an invoice generated for it. So, of course, that's going to include all of our recurring invoices based on the schedule that we had set for those recurring invoices. That's going to include all of our billable labor on service tickets. That's going to include all of the hardware that we're issuing on those tickets. It's going to include any sales orders, prepay as well. So everything that can be invoiced that hasn't been, you'll find in here. Invoices can be created by selecting the respective records that you want to create invoices for. So you can get quite granular here. You can pick exactly what it is that you want to invoice. If you want to invoice everything within a subset, so if I want to generate all my recurring invoices, but not any of the other types of invoices, I can click the checkbox against the header, and that's going to select everything within that subset. I can also filter by customer in here. So I might only want to generate Mario and Luigi's invoices, at which point I can filter by customer. I have the option to select my subset, or we'll see up here in the top right, I have my select everything option. So I can just pick everything for Mario and Luigi and just invoice all of that. And finally, we have our billing cutoff date. So for example, we've got our recurring invoices in here with our next creation date of the 1st of August. If I set my billing cutoff date to the 19th of July, we don't see them in here. So of course, our recurring invoices will only be returned in our Ready for Invoicing section based on the schedule being met for them, based on our billing cutoff date being met for them. So.
Sure. Yeah, and that's very similar to the other PSA tools, very similar to being able to say, I want to do this in a particular date range, or I want to, I only want to bill for August, or I only want to bill stuff for September or whatever, and then picking it down to specific customer. What is nice though is this is all on one screen. Is in some other tools you see this on kind of multiple screens, so you have to click, or multiple tabs at least, so you have to click through different tabs to get each one of these areas, and you have to do each area individually and then do the next area. Whereas it's much nicer to just have everything on there, because as you say, you could just go select everything, and then if you had labor and projects and items and sales orders and everything, and just do the whole lot and chuck them onto one invoice.
That's exactly it. For those individuals that are used to working that way, that like working that way and do want to go through each tab and want to check the individual types of invoices and create those one at a time, you'll see under our Ready for Invoicing section, we do have our sub lists, which do return the specific types that we just saw a moment ago on their own unique tab. So, instead of seeing it all on one screen, personally, I prefer this. Instead of seeing it all on one screen, you can go through each subsection and, of course, create your invoices that way.
Yeah, and I guess it's the same with me. I mean, I much rather have everything all on one screen, because then I can see what there is that I need to invoice. But I do work with quite a few customers in Halo that kind of like to go through each section, because they want to, make sure that they really looking over everything that's labor that needs to be billed, making sure it's all correct, without all this other sort of noise on the screen that they don't need to be focusing on. So
yeah, makes sense. Cool. So let's go ahead and create our recurring invoice. You'll see that I can expand my recurring invoices, so I can actually double check what's going to be on the invoice that's generated. So I'll select that. I'll click create invoice, set my invoice date. And it's as simple as that. Notice how our dollar period start date, dollar period end date have been replaced with the creation periods that we saw previously. And also note that the formatting of those dates has been returned based on my own specification.
Yeah, and I think, again, most people would probably at this point have some kind of integration into QuickBooks or Xero or something like that. And at that point, it would not only create the invoice in here, but also then create it in your respective accounting tool as well at the same time.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. We'll probably take a look at some point in the future. I know that integrations are incredibly important, and they probably need some better explaining. But yeah, you're absolutely correct. The Xero integration, QuickBooks, Sage, Intact, all of the online account package integrations will all immediately create invoices as soon as they're created in Halo. That's also applicable if we're automatically creating our recurring invoices. So, in an ideal world, everything's set up. You set your recurring invoices up, you automatically create them, and then based on that schedule, the invoices are automatically created, they're automatically pushed over to QuickBooks, and you don't even know that billing is happening in Halo. Yeah.
And actually, I'm a big fan of I know we have that tick box where you can send these invoices directly to the customer from Halo. Anyone who knows me for a while and has read my book will see that I'm a big fan of kind of not sending an invoice from a PSA tool directly. I would much rather push it into the accounting tool and send it from there, for lots of reasons. Mainly that at some point your accountant is going to need that information, so you might as well get it into the accounting accounting tool. So at some point you've got to get it in there, and you might as well send it from there, because I think it just looks nicer to send it directly from there, and you're not then having a mismatch of invoice numbers and all that kind of stuff. But there is the option, as you mentioned earlier on, if you really want to send them directly from Halo and then push them into the accounting tool, you can do that. But I mostly get them into the accounting tool, into Xero, and then I send them from Xero.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. It's like you say, you want the invoice in the accounting package anyway for your accountant. And another point is, if you have come over to Halo but you've been using Xero previously, the invoice PDF that you've got in Xero you're already happy with. Why try and recreate that in Halo when you can just push the invoice over to Xero and make use of that template you've already got?
Yeah.
And what's nice about the Xero integration, at least, is we also have the ability to allow the invoices to be automatically sent from Xero. That is contingent on making sure that accounts codes and nominal codes are all set up for your products and your invoices, such that the invoices go over to Xero with the authorized or submitted status. But yeah, if that's the case, then they can be auto sent from Xero. So that's quite handy. Yeah, exactly.
And I think and that's a good thing to do, is to kind of say, especially if you're automating the whole process, right? You just want to say, like you say, especially if you're a smaller company, right? I don't want to be spending all weekend thinking, okay, my invoices have gone out of Halo, now they're sitting in Xero, now I have to go into Xero and manually send them from there. So I think that whole process of going, I know it's just done, my invoices are gone, I don't have to worry about it, I can go and enjoy my weekend, do whatever I need to do, and I've got invoices have been sent out of the system automatically. So there's I'm a big fan of doing that. I'm a big fan of kind of sending them from the accounting package itself and having all the customization and everything done there. And then also when it then comes to payment gateways, and I know there's a bunch of payment gateways that work directly with Halo, like Stripe and those kind of things. I do all of that kind of stuff in the accounting package as well, so that when somebody pays on Stripe or via direct debit or something like that, it's updating it in Xero, in my case, automatically, rather than kind of doing it in Halo and then doing it in the accounting tool as well.
Yeah, makes sense.
I'd actually be interested. I mean, and if anyone wants to put a comment in the comments below, how are you guys doing it in terms of invoicing? Do a lot of people do that same approach? Do they send it from from the accounting tool, or how many people are actually sending it from the PSA tool and also then having the PSA tool update the payment and all of that kind of stuff? I'd be interested to know, how many people are doing it both ways.
Yeah, cool.
So excellent.
Okay. I think this will be a good place to wrap things up. Just an introduction to invoice creation, the creation of recurring invoices, getting an understanding of what they are conceptually in Halo, and a brief look at the ready for invoicing screen. So yeah, absolutely.
No, I think that was definitely good, and that's I think that's going to answer a lot of questions for a lot of people, because people, especially that I talk to, people who are brand new on Halo, kind of want to know what is a recurring invoice, and whereas a lot of and again, a lot of other PSA tools kind of don't have the concept of a recurring invoice. It's the invoice that the services or the products are invoiced from the actual contract itself, and it's that contract that generates the invoice. So there's no kind of two separate things. And we'll talk about that in another call, about the difference between an agreement and the recurring invoices, and why they're separate and how they can be separate and all that kind of stuff. So, but no, I really appreciate it, Morgan, as always. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. Appreciate that, Halo lets us do these, that Halo's given us your time to spend with me to do these videos. So really do appreciate it. And they really are working. I'm having a lot of people kind of, give us feedback on these videos and saying how much they like them. So really appreciate it.
That's great. That's what it's all about. And as we said long time ago, prior to these videos, implementations were kind of sort of locked away, and I would have the same calls time and time again. And now we can help hundreds, perhaps even thousands of members of the community learn how to get up to speed with Halo. So yeah, it's no hassle at all. It's what I'm here for. So yeah, happy to hear that the feedback is positive from the community.
Yeah, absolutely. So really appreciate it again, and thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next video.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Chris, and thanks everyone for watching.
See you later.
Bye.